Hey y'all, it's Andrea with The Cutest Little Thing. Thanks so much for hopping on to watch this video today. If you enjoy thrift flips, DIYs, home decor, upcycling, and all of the things, then you're at the right place. If you've never been to my channel before, welcome, and I hope you like what you see. And if you've hung out with me before, thank you so much for coming back. Alright, let's get started with today's projects. For this project, I grabbed this piece out of my stash. I thrifted this for a couple of dollars. I'm going to go in with a navy blue chalk paint and paint this. I actually just had this paint out. I was working on another project and I wanted to finish up the paint that was in my plate. So I just grabbed something to finish that paint up. And this paint is Junk Monkey paint. I had a friend to give me this paint and I've used it before and I really like it. So this is the paint that I'm using for this. There wasn't any raised ink or print or design or anything on this, so I didn't sand it. I just went right in. This paint has really good coverage. It's a really thick paint. So I just went right in and started painting without doing any priming or anything like that. I did do 2 coats just for good measure. So now I'm just going to go in with some white wax and I'm just coating this entire piece with that white wax, and that is in the Waverly. Once that is on all the way, I'm using the color Dusk and the color Cashew. Both of those are in the Waverly. And my wax is still wet. And I'm just going to go in with these colors and just do a blending technique. First, I'm going in with the color Cashew, which is like a pretty cream color. I'm getting that coated on. I'm not really doing full coverage. I'm just kind of getting it in that wax, just mixing and blending that in with that wax. Now I'm going in with that dust color. I did not let that cashew paint color dry. It had a little bit of drying time, just long enough for me to get it all over that entire piece. But I'm just going in with that blue color and blending it right into the cashew. And I just sort of keep blending both of those colors until I get the look that I'm trying to achieve. I go ahead and do my sides as well. I'm loving the way this is looking. I'm loving the way those 2 colors are blending together. When that's good and dry, I have this image I printed off of Etsy. I will link that in the description box below. I love this image. This came in a bundle with some other images, but this was, I believe, my favorite one out of that bundle. So I'm just going in with some Mod Podge. I have a sponge brush I'm using, just a sponge brush from Walmart. And I'm coating the back of that paper with my Mod Podge. The paper that I printed on is actually like a antique paper that I purchased from Amazon. And it just makes it look more vintage by, being that color. You can also get this look by coffee staining or tea staining your paper. And a lot of the Etsy shops have the option, once you purchase an image, an instant download, it will have the option to print it vintage. So now that that is good and dry, and all of that is good to go, I'm taking a piece of 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going around and doing some distressing on the wood, and then I start distressing around that image. You can see I was just kind of rubbing away at the paper that's decoupaged on there, and it's just sort of peeling up and getting it back down to the wood of the piece. And then I go and start doing the same technique at the top, over the top of the image, just rubbing away some of that paper. And it sort of just helps it look like it's made into, and I'm sorry, my head, it's right in your way there. But it sort of makes the image look like it is made into the piece rather than decoupaged on top of the piece. So I was just really wanting a vintage, antique, worn out look with this. So I was just going for it. And then I did some more heavy distressing around on the wood piece as well. I was loving the way that was looking. And I decided to go in with some antique wax in the Waverly. So I just grabbed a regular little paintbrush and I would offload the antique wax. I started around on the edges. I always like to start on the edges just in case it's a little too dark or I'm not quite liking it, because it's easier to just sort of wipe it back and fix it, if you start on the edges, and you can sort of offload your brush as well and then slowly go into the front of the piece. So I had these cute little transfers in my stash as well. So I was kind of, going through them, trying to see. I knew I wanted to use a couple of them, so I was kind of placing them to see how I wanted them. So I placed that little one there at the top, just using that transfer tool that comes with your transfers. I'm pretty sure I ordered these off of Etsy. I will double check, and if I can find those order details, I will include that link in the description box as well. I loved the blue color on these transfers, and when I ordered these, I actually got some in the blue like this, and I also got some in black and I believe navy blue, if I'm not mistaken. And I decided to go with this one for the bottom. I thought it just added a little something to the piece, a little something extra. I like that little touch. And it just matched everything, the colors in my image as well. So now I'm just going along with some more antique wax and just wiping back the excess with a dry paper towel. And then I took that antique wax and just went around my image also, where I sanded away some of that paper around the edge. And then I went over those transfers and sealed those in as well. And I just kept adding and wiping back until I got the look that I was trying to achieve. Highlighting those edges and corners of my decoupaged image just to add a little character and contrast there. And then I lightly took my brush and did a dry brushing technique with that antique wax over that entire image. And then just took that dry paper towel and wiped back the excess. Look how cute this is looking, guys. The only thing it needs now is a bow. So I had some of this burlap ribbon I purchased off of Amazon. Again, I will include that in the description box. I just cut some strips of different types, various types. I also had some raffia, and I just did a crisscrossing technique with those different strips of ribbon, just arranging and placing them how I wanted them. I took a small piece of raffia, tied it into a bow, and hot glued it up at the top. And here is our finished product, guys. I love how this turned out. I love how those colors just blended and how it looks so old looking. If you hang out with me much, you know that I love anything old, rusty, and crusty. And I love how that image just looks like it's a part of this piece and not really decoupaged on. Let me know what you think of this. Thanks so much for joining me for this project. Okay, guys, for this project, I have this frame that I had in my stash. I love getting these frames and redoing them all sorts of different ways. So the back of this one had the paper over it. So I just took my X-Acto knife and I just found the little slat and I just cut around all the way around the square shape there, and then underneath that, after I peeled the paper away, were staples that had the image secured into the frame. So I just took my little pair of, well, I couldn't find my regular pliers, so I just took my wire cutters and just pulled out all those staples. And there were a lot of them, may I add. I took the glass out and then I just gave the frame a good clean with some rubbing alcohol. And that is a key. When you're painting, you want to be sure you're working on a nice clean surface. So I went in here with Fusion paint. And this is, I did not catch that color when I showed it on the camera, and I cannot think. I think it's Cathedral Taupe, but I am not 100% sure. I will be able to clarify that later on in the video. Sorry, guys. So I'm just going around this entire frame with that color. It's a very light beige, even an off-white color. It's like between an off-white and a light beige. I love this color. It's such a beautiful color. So after that first coat, I just went in with my blow dryer and gave it a quick dry. And I did go in with a second coat after that dried. Now I want to do a little blending, and I wanted some green. So I'm using the color Celery in the Waverly. I'm also adding pickling salt and baking soda for texture. Pickling salt is a very coarse salt, if you're familiar with it. It's much coarser than regular table salt. And of course, baking soda, you know what baking soda is. But those two combined create the best little texture paste recipe. And it just gives it a different look. The way that texture you'll see here in a minute, we'll start getting some texture on our frame here. And you will see what I'm talking about. It just creates, it takes that up to the next level, getting that texture on there. And I'm just using a regular paintbrush, getting that. It's sort of like a paste that we created with that mixture. And I'm getting it on my paintbrush, and I'm just doing a dabbing technique to get that applied to the frame and to get that spread all around evenly. And there is some crevices and a crease there in that frame, so I'm being careful not to leave like a glob of paste in those areas. So I'm just making sure I get that spread all around evenly. And you could see there in that close-up that texture that we were already getting. So now I'm just taking that heat, applying that heat again, and drying that paste. I want it to dry really well. And now on the sides, I'm just taking this piece of 80 grit sandpaper and I'm just scuffing it up a little bit, distressing back some of that paint and showing some of that frame, because this was a wooden frame. So that's just distressing it and showing that wood, letting that wood poke through underneath. And I just really liked how that looked. But I just wanted to do that on the edge because I didn't want to sand away that texture we created on the front of the frame. And then I sealed that entire frame. I took it outside and sealed it with my Rust-Oleum clear sealer. So now for the picture part, I'm just taking that insert that was in there and I'm just painting over that image. I'm using plaster in the Waverly, and my paint is getting down to the bottom in that container, and it's getting thicker. It's like the lower it gets, the thicker it gets, which that worked out good for this piece, and it gave me a little texture. And now I'm sealing that in after it dried with some Mod Podge. If you are not aware, Mod Podge is a sealer also. So I just wanted to seal that paint in. And I'm just drying that with my blow dryer. Oh, and I only did the center part at first. I sealed that center part because I didn't think I was going to do anything with the outside edge. But then I decided I did want to do a transfer. And I was just going to take up that entire piece and not just that center piece. So I went ahead and sealed the whole thing. So this is a beautiful transfer from IOD. And right now I cannot think of that packet that it came from. But I will include that in the description box below. If you're watching from YouTube, it will be in that description. And if you are watching from Facebook or TikTok, you can always comment and ask any questions about products or anything, and I will be sure and share that information with you. So this transfer, I was sort of having to cut it to fit and work on this piece. So first I wanted to cut the little girl out, and I wanted her to be the center of our picture here. So I cut her out first, and I was just placing it there, making sure I was getting the sizing correct. So I'm just peeling away that white piece and just laying down that transfer where I want it. And you want to be sure you get it where you want it before you put it down, because when you put it down, you're committed. 9 times out of 10, you won't be able to lift that transfer back up without it trying to adhere already. So I'm just taking that transfer tool and you just rub back and forth on your image. And then you begin just lifting up on that clear piece as you go back and forth. And slowly and steadily, you peel away that clear piece and your transfer will adhere. And then I just sort of take that little clear piece and rub to make sure that transfer is down in all of those areas. And now I'm just taking, cutting another piece of that transfer off where I can place it on the edge on each side of my little girl there. And I'm just sort of piecing it back together on this frame, or on the piece that's going to go in the frame. And again, just taking that transfer tool, rubbing that image down and pulling up on that clear part. And then just patting it and rubbing it with that clear part, making sure it's adhered. And now just that's the same technique on the other side. I wanted to put another piece of that transfer on the other side. And I liked how the wording was over the top of the little girl. And same technique with our transfer tool. And I did want the rest of that wording down at the bottom of my piece. So I'm just going to overlap, and you can do that with transfers. You can overlap them how you want them, but it was just wording with some more of that greenery and those leaves and rose thorns and things. So I just overlapped that down there at the bottom where you could see more of that wording. And look how cute, you guys. Now I'm just sealing that transfer in with my DIY clear wax and just using a little sponge brush there and just rubbing that wax in really well into that transfer, and also sealing in, well, we already sealed our paint with the Mod Podge. And now I cleaned the glass with Windex, and I put our picture in our frame, and I did decide I wanted to grunge it up, antique it up a little bit. So that crevice or crack that's going all the way around the frame, I'm just taking that little paintbrush and brushing in that DIY dark wax. I'm getting it all applied first, just getting it applied all the way around. And now I'm just taking a clean paintbrush and going back over that, and that's going to wipe away the excess. And it is also giving me a little bit of that dark wax on that brush, so I'm sort of dry brushing on a little bit more of that dark wax over the entire frame. And you can only see it when you get up close to it. But it gave it a really nice look and just blended it all together. You can see there. Now I just wanted to make it look a little more completed. So I wanted to this is a piece of muslin cloth I just cut to fit over the back of this frame. And now I'm just hot gluing it down. And this is going to hold our frame back together. Remember, in the beginning, we had to cut with our X-Acto knife to get to the inside of our frame to change it up. So adding this piece of muslin cloth to the back is kind of acting as that piece of paper back on there, securing everything back inside of our frame. And look how good that image looks with our frame, that green color. So I did want to add a little bit of greenery on the corner of our frame here and just add a little embellishment with a bow. So I just hot glued that piece of greenery there in the corner. And I just tied a simple little bow with a piece of lace and a piece of burlap. And then I hot glued those two little bows together. And then I just hot glued that right on top of our greenery. And I did decide to add just a little more greenery coming out of those sides, and one going like down the frame on the other side. So I really thought that took it up to the next level by doing that. Now I'm just adjusting those ribbons how I want them. And guys, look how cute this turned out. I love it. And I just think it is super cute for your shabby chic decor. And it's also super cute for the Valentine's season that we are approaching with the pretty pink and green and those roses. Let me know what you think of this, guys, and thanks so much for joining me.